What's up, Internet? Welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Agustin Sanchez, founder of the Photographic Journal. Today, I welcome the audience to what I'm affectionately calling the Talking Room, a segment that lets the audience peek behind the curtain here at the Photographic Journal. I'm joined today by our editor-in-chief, Lou Noble, a photographer exposing his subject's beauty one natural smile at a time, whose soul helps to power our journal's underlying machinations. Lou, welcome to the Talking Room.
Thank you, Augustine.
It's good to have you here, man. I thought I was going to be the only TPJ staff on this podcast for a while.
Well, that's a lie. You made me do this.
I do have like blackmail stuff on you, so.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
Well, promises.
Yeah, that's the beauty of blackmail, isn't it?
So, for those that don't know you, Lou, tell the audience a bit about yourself.
I am LA born and raised. I work as a medic on film and television sets. In my spare time, I enjoy surfing, taking pictures, and reading books. My turn-ons are home-cooked food, ice cream. My turn-offs are conservatism and intelligent design. We can edit that part out.
Well, we can cut out whatever we want, or we can leave it in, warts and all.
For you to shape into a beautiful sculpture.
I was going to ask, you mentioned that, one of your pastimes, I know that you surf. I know that you're an avid reader. What are you reading right now?
Right now I'm rereading a book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, an English book from about 10 years ago about the resurrection of English magic in the 1800s.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
No, honestly, it does.
I can also give you another version of, I'm taking a look at a book I read years ago called Nixon Land, about the rise of Richard Nixon. I think it's very pertinent for these times.
I could completely understand that.
Clay, Augustine, giving you clay.
So the audience probably doesn't know this because we have over 70 interviews at this point. But if you go far back into the archives of the Photographic Journal, you'll see that Lou is actually our first interview. He wasn't originally part of the team that created the site, but I would say was consultative during its formative years. So honestly, from my standpoint, you in many ways were the model audience that I was tailoring the site for, which is why you and I chatted so often early on. Almost 8-9 years later, the site has evolved in scope and aspiration. Do you have a sense of who we're making the site for now?
I would say we're making it for the enthusiast, someone who is curious not just about who takes the pictures they love, but why they take them and how they take them. Any fans of photography or art that are curious about more than just the surface.
It's interesting you say the enthusiast. I think that cleverly gets around the idea of amateur or professional. I think that you can be a very good professional photographer that isn't an enthusiast and doesn't overthink things or wonder why they're doing things. And you could be an amateur that labors over those facts.
Right. Professional really just speaks to, do you do it for a job? I don't know that it automatically means you are deeper into the art than someone who does it for fun or a private passion.
To your knowledge, in terms of who we're publishing and who we're interviewing, what's the breakdown there? How many people are quote unquote professional photographers versus just people that have a passion for photography?
That's definitely changed from when we started, right? When we started, it was probably 90% people we knew from Flickr or Tumblr. And as time went on and we became more established, it became easier for us to gain access to actual professionals. So I'd say now it's probably flipped, where it's at least 90 to 95% professionals or aspiring professionals.
Yeah, I talked with Sydney Claire last week, and it's interesting. She talked about her path of moving to New York, and I think this is pretty typical for most photographers, is she had to get like a waitressing job really to make ends meet, but it allowed her to pursue what she wanted without having to, I guess, give in to just taking jobs for the sake of getting a job.
Right. That kind of speaks to one of my cardinal ideas for photography nowadays, that in the past 10 years, as digital has made it a lot easier for people to enter the art of photography, it's also become the preferred idea that if you love it, if you have a passion for it, you should do it for a job. And I've always disagreed with that notion. I think a lot of people nowadays are doing photography as a job because they're talented at it, but they don't necessarily have a passion for it. It's that they're business people who have a skill at photography. Whereas a lot of people who are very passionate about photography are not necessarily business-minded and don't really enjoy the professional aspects of photography. And that you shouldn't necessarily push people into doing that as a profession just because they enjoy it. That you should be able to enjoy something without having to do it for a job.
Right. I think that people, they might have started off having a passion for it, and then it becomes a job, and you quickly might get disillusioned or overthink things or become neurotic about what you're putting out. I know that, was it Nick Fancher that, just cut out all social media because it started getting, it was just too much.
The fun thing for him is that when he did that, his work, or his business rather, only became more successful.
Which is counterintuitive to what most people think.
Very. And I don't think that's a typical result. I think it's a combination of his particular talent and also his skills in business and marketing, knowing his regional market and understanding how to market himself. He's very engaged in workshops and prints and reaching out to potential employers, the business and marketing aspects of the job, the kind of things that a lot of photographers either don't enjoy or don't understand.
Yeah, it's intriguing. One of the first conversations you and I had 9-odd years ago was really about that. There's a certain hustle that a professional photographer has to endure in order to really be successful. And little of it is actually shooting or concepting creative work.
Right. It's the professional side of professional photography.
Which mainly is emails and probably a lot of bullshit.
Dealing with clients, dealing with clients, trying to find clients, trying to market yourself, finances, agents, managers, shifting, wondering whether who did we speak with? We spoke with Frank Ockenfels for the first time a few years ago. And one of the things he talked about was that he didn't change his style as the times were changing. He basically inadvertently waited for things to come around so that people, to the point where people appreciated his style again. And that's a question that all photographers have to ask themselves if they're professionals, if they want to make it in the long run, is, your style is very popular for maybe 5-10 years, but after that, do you change? Do you stay the same? Is that something you do out of passion, out of continuing to learn and grow, or something you do because you're trying to hold on to the changing tastes?
Yeah, I think it's a real struggle for either an established photographer or somebody that's emerging, because you're trying to find your voice and you're trying to find a way to be honest to yourself. I think that, like Jill Greenberg with, crying babies, I'm sure she wants to shoot herself in the head every time she has to do that, or is known as the photographer that does that.
I mean, and I think that also gets to something that's very much at the heart of the Photographic Journal, is that we place a lot of value on photographers who are able to create / craft their own point of view, their own voice, their own visual language, so that you either know it's them seeing a picture, or you can tell it's them by how someone was captured. And I don't know that that's given a lot of priority nowadays. I think especially with social media, it's very popular to see a style and then do your best to copy that style. And then that is your style now. I started on Flickr in 2005. I love the way that site is. They've made me a judge. They've put out a video. Like, we have a very happy relationship. But I do really think that the nicest thing about Flickr is that you click on an image and it's just that image all by itself. If you want to look at another image, you've got to be very active to keep going. And that is the way you should look at photos. Facebook, you can do it with Facebook. Tumblr is where the scroll really became popular. And I think that scroll is anathema to being able to enjoy photos the way they should be enjoyed. Which is, a little bit elitist, but I think that's also part of the Photographic Journal, is that we actively try to craft a particular taste, particular ideas, and those are the things that we try to push out to our audience.
So you spoke a little bit about that point of view, that thing that we're trying to push on the Photographic Journal. We don't always come out and say it. I think that we let the work and how we choose the work speak for itself. But in your mind, as editor-in-chief, editorially, what are we trying to say to our audience? What are we trying to highlight?
Well, it's not one thing. We definitely try to highlight people who are up and coming, who have a vision, who create striking work. We try to be representative of the population as a whole. We try to educate our audience in how we see good photography, what we define it as, which is many things, when it comes to portraiture, or when it comes to environmental work or landscape or documentary photography.
It's interesting to me because I feel like so much content on the web, and we made the conscious decision not to go this way a long time ago, and we've reaffirmed it many times, but so much content on the web, whether it's on YouTube or on blogs or reviews, we're looking at technical aspects of things, how-tos, things that really distill things down for somebody to a series of steps. And I think that one of the hallmarks of what you and I are always trying to do is raise the conversation a little bit above that. I don't want to tell somebody how to take a portrait or what pose to put a model in, because then it becomes formulaic. I don't necessarily think that anyone needs to be emulating me or anyone that we're highlighting.
I think, especially starting out, I think other sites have already got that covered. I think if you want to figure out how to use your camera or learn particular techniques, there are more than enough sites that cover that. And for us, it was about operating in a space that was perhaps less busy, less full. less cluttered. But also it speaks to our interests. Our interests are not focused on the technical. We're focused more on why people are shooting, what kind of emotions they're trying to convey, how they came about their style. What does their style say about them? We're kind of more of a psychologically oriented photography site. And I don't see that as above or below the technical aspects. I just think neither of us are as interested in the technical side. You want the technical stuff, you can acquire that easily. I think it's more engaging to ask people what they were thinking than what tool they were using. And that's, we basically interview people asking the questions that we want answered for ourselves, and hopefully the audience, I would assume at this point, that's what they want as well.
So it's interesting to me, as you are trying to articulate, I think, why we do what we do here at TPJ, I think it also mirrors the way that you approach your photography. I think that you have always sought to capture something that is authentic, something that's quote unquote real. Tell me a bit about that. Like, as you go in taking a portrait, what are you looking at out of your subject?
And I think this is true of many of the people we've interviewed, is there's a curiosity about the subject. And that curiosity, those questions are answered by photographing them. The authenticity, hopefully, is because you've answered those questions. You figured out, why does this person do this? Or what is it that causes this person to react this way? Why do they think this way? Why do they look a certain way when they hear a certain thing? I think as a portraiture artist, that curiosity is pretty much everything. If you go in with a sense of what you want someone to already look like, you're not going to learn anything about them, which is fine for many kinds of photography. The kind I do, it's essential to be curious.
Here's the thing. I connected with the authenticness in your photos from the start, and it's why you were the first interview. I believe that there's beauty in every single human being, and a lot of the times the things that people don't like about themselves, or the quirk that they try to sort of suss out with a fake smile, is actually taking out some of that beauty. Like, sometimes that's the most interesting part of them, and to them they're practicing at not looking in that certain way. And there's times that I really gravitate towards a photo, and the model or the subject that I'm photographing probably hates it, but I don't know. I'm just trying to be authentic to who I am.
It depends on the kind of portraiture you're doing. The kind of portraiture I think we're both focused on as artists is about that authenticity and the engagement with the subject. Fashion photography, conceptual work, those are approaching different questions to answer. That might not be about the subject. The subject might, in those cases, be helping them to articulate the answer. I hesitate to put authenticity up on a pedestal, because there's definitely something to be said for artifice. I remember reading a few years ago a defense of fake beauty, that the authentic look is just as much a facade as something more composed or more crafted. That it's always performative. It's just a different kind of performance. One of the things that I've seen in the years I've been working for the Photographic Journal is a lot of, for lack of a better term, girlfriend experience photography, where the authenticity is this attempt, or the authenticity is a tool to craft this kind of captured narrative of a female subject. Oh, she was just sleeping in bed and she just woke up and I just happened to take the picture, or she was just in the shower, or, she just happened to be naked walking through the hallway and I captured this photo, where it uses the language of authenticity for something that is still very much crafted.
You can only get so authentic. Even when you set up whatever you're trying to get out of a subject, you're putting them in your sandbox in order to get a reaction from them. That might be an honest reaction to you, but you're still imposing some will on whatever, artifice. Your artifice is much looser than someone that, I've always marveled at photographers that can have someone come in and sit down and all of the photos are exquisite because of their voice, not necessarily of who's sitting there.
A lot of what we talk about when we talk about having a personal style, it's not necessarily they always use green or they always use kind of lighting, but that they can craft something that is very evocative, very striking, repeatedly, consistently, in a way that is recognizable.
It's also interesting because so much of that is self-editing as well, because especially with digital now, you're not constrained to how many shots or how long you explore. I mean, I guess you wouldn't be with film, but it's much more cost prohibitive.
It's that kind of like rose tinted view of the past that back then you only had so many photos. It's more about, and it's always been about, editing and having the discerning eye to recognize the good photo when you see it.
You mentioned earlier the idea of the very sort of architected photo versus the one that's more natural. And I think what happens is, number one, there's different personality types that are attracted to many different things. But whatever the zeitgeist is, it's kind of like a pendulum. It goes back and forth. I think that there's times where a very artificial beauty is in vogue. And it's something that you see in film and popular culture as well as photography and art. And then the pendulum might swing back the other way, almost as a distancing, as you approach sort of like a mass of everyone is doing that style. The opposite style can seem alluring and sexy.
Sure. I think one of the great things about the proliferation of photography is that there are a lot of people who aren't dealing in beauty at all. When we were on Flickr and Tumblr, the range of photography was kind of narrow. There's a lot of portraiture, a lot of models, and that was kind of it. And now you see a lot more of all kinds of photography. Yeah, and as much as we kvetch about, certain bad trends, it's undeniable that a lot of great photography that is completely separate from a pretty picture has become both popular and well regarded. Several of the photographers we've interviewed, Sasha Artunova, people we follow, one guy that comes to mind is Pat Martin, or Jack Davidson. Just people with very strong styles that are about more than, the beauty is very humanistic, but it's not necessarily of humans, it's not necessarily about humans. And it also shows people and things in ways that are not about facade, not about artifice.
As you've gone through the last couple of years working through the Photographic Journal, do you have a moment that sticks out in your mind? Do you have something that where you were just like, wow?
I think maybe like one of the moments like that is interviewing Gregory Crewdson. I think that was 2016. I was at the Universal Studios lot working as they were taking down a set for a show I'd worked on. And so I interviewed him in an empty stage. And that was fantastic. We did that through Skype. That is probably one of the strangest and most enjoyable moments.
The thought of you on an empty stage by yourself, were you on like an iPad or a laptop?
Yeah, using it on an iPad and then recording it on my phone.
Yeah, there's something very stark. Like I wish I had a photographer shadowing you or something. I don't know.
The interviews, more often than not, tend to be the best part of working at the Photographic Journal. We've gotten to talk to most of our favorite photographers. We've gotten to discover great photographers. There were photographers I had no idea about before. We started casting a wide net to find people to work with, to find people to interview. So that kind of sense of discovery, and the trip to New Orleans, that was pretty awesome too. But mainly the discovery, but also that trip to Houston, that was good. But it's really about the discovery.
The trip to New York was pretty good too.
The trip to New York was pretty good. That all went great. Every other year we get a nice trip somewhere, so that's a fine perk. Interviewing Tabitha Soren, I thought that was probably one of the, actually for interviewing her and then for photographing her, that was great. Just because I'd known of her for so long, since I was very young. Not to make her feel old, but.
Well, I mean, she is somebody that you and I both grew up watching on television, and then after admiring her art, and I was very excited watching you interview her, go up and shoot her. I think that the shoot with Moby and highlighting some work that he was doing was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, sure, one of the greatest hits, I think Moby was definitely the interview where we gained access to more photographers. After we'd shot Moby, we were able to reach out to Emily Shore, to Chris Buck, and have them take us seriously. Ron Haviv, Alex Soth. All those early interviews were basically all on the back of having a little more visibility because of Moby. And then after we had those interviews, they allowed us even more access.
Just building up that empire, man. Little by little.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so next we're going to move into audience questions. We had put up a little quiz or question poll up on Instagram, and we got some
more questions than we know what to do with.
Yeah, so we're pulling a few of them just for fun, and here we go. I guess you and I can both answer. I think that we can recontextualize some of these and make them work for us. How do you choose who you feature?
So that's probably a two-part question, because we feature people for interviews,
right?
But we also feature people on our Instagram takeovers. For our interviews, it tends to be about photographers we've followed for a while, whose work we're very curious about. Not in terms of how did you do this, but what motivates you? What are you seeking when you photograph? How did you get to where you are? The takeovers are much more simple. They're people we whose work we like and we want to share with the audience, which is also an aspect of the interviews, but it's a lot more straightforward. We pick people with strong aesthetics, people who tend to have larger bodies of work, and people who we think deserve an audience, or deserve, what's a better way?
Oh, deserve to be featured. I mean,
deserve to be featured.
Yeah.
Well, but that's answering the question with the question. People we think deserve a spotlight.
They also could be asking about the essays, and I think that it's probably like 60-40, but I think that we will see someone's work and then sort of be intrigued by them and message them saying, hey, you should submit some work to us. But we also just get a lot of work that comes to us, and the team just picks through it.
Right. Now with the photo essays, we've got Paige as our essays editor. So what she and I are both looking for are, in photo essays, are series that intrigue us, that don't look like something we've seen 100 times, that don't necessarily look like something we've already featured. Right now with the pandemic, we're getting a lot of pandemic-related work that is very similar, which tends to just generally be the case. We get a lot of similar-looking submissions, so the ones that stand out have a much better chance of getting on the site.
The next question: if you could join any past or current music group, which would you join?
Oh, you join the Beatles. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think it's the Beatles. Maybe the Stones, maybe Hendrix.
Maybe the Stones. There are some unhinged people out there who would say the Beach Boys, but that's madness. That's just madness.
Current musical group, I'd probably want to be like in the Kills or something. I don't know. They seem like more artistic to me. They have a vibe.
Current musical group. That's a good question. Ooh.
I mean, just say TV on the radio and get it over.
No, because there's like a, they're not really working right now, and trying to think of like who I've been listening to lately. That I've been listening to a lot of like solo artists. That's because Run the Jewels. I'll be in Run the Jewels. That'd be a fun one.
I support this.
I'll be the third member of Run the Jewels.
We kind of already answered this, but editorially, how do I apply and stick out?
Oh, yeah, it's a good one to kind of go fine grain on. You apply by going to the website. We've got a submissions page, gives you all the details. How do you stand out? Well, that one's tricky. But I think it's important to pay attention to photographers who have very strong points of view and emulate not their technical approach, but their thematic approach. Looking at the body of work of a great photographer and seeing where the through line is emotionally or thematically, and then trying to apply that to your own work.
Next question. You have a fantastic feed. Keep on. It's not a question, but we appreciate the sentiment.
We do, but we also are pedantic about, if we ask for a question, we really want a question in response.
So what's interesting to me, and the reason I left it in was our Instagram feed is very different from our site. And I think that some people get confused when they come to it and they see a body of work, over the last week, and then it changes.
Well, different in what way?
There's more of a mix. So we're highlighting and letting an artist take over the Instagram weekly. And we also have, we're publicizing our essays or features or interviews. It's something, we were very inspired originally by The Great Discontent. And in talking to Ryan and his original design for that site, he originally just had whatever the latest interview was on the front page where you could just scroll down. And people would be confused that was that artist's site. They wouldn't understand the greater context of it.
I see.
So I think in that way, there are people that I've shown the Instagram site to, and they're like, oh, this is a really cool Instagram. This artist is really good. And I'm like, no, these artists, like, we're highlighting different people because they just look at photos. It goes back to the problem that you were having with Instagram as a whole. They're just swiping, they're not reading, and you miss some of the context.
Yeah, I think the site and the Instagram are pretty similar. If you give it, a few moments of attention. A lot of the people that we feature on Instagram end up doing photo essays for us. So I think the vibe is very in line with our tastes. I think the only difference is that there's a lot more instant work. On Instagram you can see 20 different photographers just by scrolling for a few seconds. And by design, the site is set up to reward your attention.
Moving on to our next question. What is your favorite fast food chain?
In-N-Out. Yeah.
I would say In-N-Out as well. I think that you also have to define what fast food is. I'm going to keep it as something that has a drive-through.
Fair.
I don't actually have In-N-Out because I'm in Florida.
You've made a horrible mistake.
No, I know that, but Miami's pretty rad. You should visit me.
Does it have an In-N-Out?
It does not.
No, case closed.
I guess on my side, what is it? Drive-through? I don't know. Wendy's? No. I'm going to go with Steak and Shake. Okay. The next comment, I'm going to say comment because it's not even a question. Looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Well, it's going to be the same thing we did last week and the week before, but it's still going to be great.
What do you think comes next? How do we expand? Is there anything that we should be doing or taking advantage of? I think that quarantine is a time for self-reflection.
Well, let's put it this way. Like, what do we have planned? Rather than tell the audience what we should be doing, we could give them hints as to what we will be doing.
You took the baton and ran with it.
That's what I do with batons. We got dreams, man. We got big dreams.
We have huge dreams. I mean,
we're working on TPJ books. The beautiful dreamers that we are, envision for the site is being able to do all kinds of things to help the photographers that we really like, who are up and coming. I think that if you really take apart the site and look at its guts, you'll see that it's as much about helping new photographers as it is anything else. To that end, we want to publish books by up-and-coming photographers. We want to put out prints for the photographers. We want to do for up-and-coming photographers what they are unable to do for themselves because of lack of capital, lack of time, lack of resources. We want to become a hub to incubate the work of the photographers we like, be that professionally or just artistically, because like we said, being a photographer who just wants to make great photos regardless of a career just as legitimate a goal.
Conversations is available on all major podcast platforms. Like this episode, subscribe and rate us on iTunes. We promise we'll give you a hug if we ever see you in the real world, or at least a high five. Visit us at the Photographic Journal for our latest interviews, photo essays, and features. Want even more? Follow us on Instagram at TPJ.